Prayer is more than just words whispered in quiet moments. It's the heartbeat of our spiritual life, the very connection that draws us close to God. It's in prayer where we find peace when life feels overwhelming, strength when we feel weak, and direction when we're uncertain about the path ahead. Prayer is where we meet with God face to face, where our hearts align with His, and where we experience His presence in a powerful way. But what does a life built on prayer truly look like? To find the answer, we need only to look at Jesus. Jesus didn't just pray out of routine. For Him, prayer was everything. It was the source of His power, the center of His relationship with the Father, and the place where He found strength to carry out His mission. They were filled with passion, trust, and surrender. From His early morning retreats to the mountains to His heart-wrenching cries in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus' prayer life shows us what it means to truly depend on God in every situation. Join us as we dive into the incredible prayer life of Jesus. Together, we'll explore how He prayed in times of joy and in moments of deep agony, and how He always sought the Father's will above all else. Let's walk through His journey of prayer and discover how we too can build a deeper, more intimate connection with God through prayer. Think about it. From the very beginning, before He ever performed a miracle or preached to crowds, Jesus sought out the Father in prayer. Picture Him standing in the waters of the Jordan River, baptized by John. As He rose from the water, something extraordinary happened. The sky itself opened, and the Spirit descended like a dove. Then a voice so intimate, so full of love, said, "You are my beloved Son. With you I am well pleased." This wasn't just an affirmation. It was a moment that revealed something crucial. Jesus' identity was rooted in the Father's love. Before He healed, before He called disciples, before the cross, His foundation was in this connection with God, and that connection was sustained through prayer. Now imagine, after such a powerful moment, being led into the wilderness. The wilderness is a dry, lonely place where there's nothing but dust and silence. For 40 days, Jesus fasted, and during that time He prayed. It's in these solitary moments that the tempter comes. Isn't that when we're most vulnerable? But here's the beauty of Jesus' response. He didn't rely on His own strength. He turned to the Father in prayer. When Satan offered Him power and shortcuts, Jesus held fast, speaking words that revealed His heart. Man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. What a powerful reminder for us. Jesus shows us that even in the wilderness of our lives, when we feel weak or isolated, it is through prayer that we find strength. Prayer is what anchors us when we're tempted to take the easy road, when we're pressured to abandon our calling. And then there were the times when the crowds gathered around Him. Picture the scene. Jesus healing the sick, feeding the hungry, teaching the lost. From morning till night, people would flock to Him, longing for a touch, a word, a miracle. And yet, even after those long, exhausting days when everyone else would collapse into sleep, Jesus would slip away. Why? Because He craved something more than sleep. He craved communion with His Father. He went up mountains, into deserted places, just to be alone in prayer. This wasn't a chore or an obligation for Jesus. It was His lifeline. It was where He poured out His heart, where He sought the Father's guidance, where He found peace amidst the noise of the world. It's as if He needed to retreat into the quiet, just to be reminded again and again of the Father's voice. The same voice that had spoken over Him at His baptism, "You are my beloved Son." That's what prayer does, doesn't it? It pulls us back to the truth of who we are. In prayer, we're reminded of God's love, God's purpose, and God's power in our lives. It's in those quiet moments, when we strip away the busyness, the stress, and the noise, that we can hear Him whispering to our hearts, reminding us that we are loved. The disciples saw this in Jesus. They witnessed how his prayer life was different. They watched as he would return from prayer refreshed, filled with strength and ready to serve. It moved them so deeply that they came to him and said, "Lord, teach us to pray." Not teach us to heal or teach us to preach, but teach us to pray. That's because they knew where his power came from. It wasn't just in the miracles, it was in the intimacy he had with God through prayer. And so, Jesus gave them the prayer that has been on the lips of believers ever since. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Jesus wasn't teaching them to pray for just their needs. He was showing them how to align their hearts with God's will, to trust in God's provision, and to seek forgiveness and guidance. It was a prayer of surrender, not just asking for things, but seeking God's presence and purpose in every part of life. But perhaps the most intense moment of prayer in Jesus' life came in the Garden of Gethsemane. Can you see him there? It's dark, the air is heavy, and Jesus knows what's coming. He knows that the cross is just hours away. And yet, what does he do? He prays. In his agony, he falls to the ground and cries out, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." This wasn't a simple prayer. This was the prayer of a son facing the unimaginable weight of the world's sin, knowing the cost that lay ahead. And yet even in this moment, Jesus surrendered to the Father's will. His love for us was so great, but his trust in the Father was even greater. He prayed through the pain, and his answer was the cross. But even then he prayed, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." In his final breaths, Jesus was still praying, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." From the beginning of his ministry to his last moment on the cross, Jesus showed us that prayer is the foundation of everything. It's the place where we pour out our hearts, surrender our will, and receive the strength to carry out God's purpose. So what can we take from Jesus' prayer life? First, prayer is about relationship. Jesus prayed not just to ask for things, but to stay close to the Father. In prayer, he found strength, guidance, and peace. We too are invited into that relationship, to draw near to God, to listen for his voice, and to trust in his love. Second, prayer is a place of surrender. Jesus didn't avoid the hard prayers. He brought his fears and desires before God, but he always ended with, "Your will be done." In prayer, we learn to trust God's plans, even when we don't understand them. And finally, prayer is constant. Jesus didn't wait for a crisis to pray. He prayed in the quiet moments, in the busy moments, and in the hard moments. His life was a rhythm of prayer, and that's the model he gives us, to live in constant connection with the Father, finding our strength, our purpose, and our peace in him.